It's another day of Bitcoin making new all-time highs, with the Bitcoin price now above $120,000. And as you can see in front of you on the 3-day chart, we've been going absolutely parabolic, just making higher highs and higher highs basically since 2023. But in today's video, I'm not going to focus on Bitcoin. I want to focus on how you can capitalize in terms of altcoins, because I do have a theory that I want to share in today's video, that this current Bitcoin run is actually very good for the altcoin market and a few alts in particular. So today I'm going to talk about the altcoins in light of this Bitcoin pump that could be next to catch up. I'm going to run you guys through all of the charts and give you my latest analysis. I also want to talk about the PumpFun token, which is launching today. And then we're going to go into 7 or 8 coins that you need to know about right now, especially ahead of what's going to be a big week in crypto. So if you enjoy content like this, where I keep you up to date with the market, make sure you do smash that subscribe button down below and hit that post notification bell. I'm back here in the studio, grinding every single day, spending a lot of time on the charts because it's time to lock in. I was actually supposed to stay in Europe and extend my trip, but I ended up coming home early because, I mean, when I saw this chart and when I saw the market breaking out, I was like, yeah, we got to lock in now. There is definitely a lot to do. Before we get into the altcoin stuff, I want to firstly just talk about Bitcoin a little bit, because I do have some plans surrounding trading Bitcoin. So obviously, if you zoom out, you can see on the daily, 3-day, weekly, we've broken a major level. Since we broke out of that range, we've pretty much been going up only. If you do zoom into the chart a little bit to the 30-minute chart, you can see that we actually, towards the end of last week, started to form a bit of a range on Bitcoin. And this is something that I pointed out in my Discord as a range I was trading. Because we only had a very shallow bullish retest, I only got 1/3 of my fill, which I was low-key a little bit annoyed about because I wanted to add even more, but is what it is. It happened late at night, so I wasn't able to execute my whole order. Then we ended up coming up, which was, in my opinion, triggered by a lot of front running of the US Open. So a lot of OTC desks were accumulating ahead of US Open on Monday, which is happening now. And we did see a slight sell-off, because with these front runs, what they're basically anticipating is that there is positive ETF flows when the US markets open, and then they unload some of that trade or all of that trade on the Monday, which is why we've seen price spike and then come down just a little bit here. In terms of entries on Bitcoin or trading on Bitcoin, there are a couple of key levels that I wanted to highlight. You do have 2 CME gaps starting to form. Now, the really big one where there would be a lot of liquidity is around 114 to 115K. The only problem is the current momentum of Bitcoin, especially on the 30-minute chart, does suggest, in my opinion, trend continuation to the upside. So I'm looking at the money noodle on the 30-minute chart to try and validate potentially a breakdown. If we did for some reason start to look weak and flip this level, then I would potentially be targeting the first CME gap, which is at 118, and then obviously you do have the 114 level even lower. But the fact that this range had already formed prior to the breakout, even if we did break down, I think we'd only just maybe come to the first gap at the top of this range. So that's probably where I would take my first Bitcoin trade or make my next buy. It's at the top of this range, so a retest if we do get there, and there's confluence with the CME futures gap at 118K. And then if we were blessed enough to get another entry lower, 114 to 115 would be a logical stopping point in my opinion, but it's probably going to take a big sell-off or a big headline to actually go down there. So I won't be holding my breath for that entry, but that would be a bigger zone to potentially load up on spot, and this 118 zone would be probably a low leverage long for myself. I do want to make more Bitcoin buys for my midterm portfolio, because I do think Bitcoin runs even higher into the end of the year, and then I think we cool off for a little bit, and then I think we have another big run in 2026. So either you can try and position now, or you could try and position after we cool off. But the problem is, Bitcoin could run to 150 to 200 before we get a cool off back to 140, which is still 20K higher than we are now, which is why I am looking at pullback scenarios to add some Bitcoin. So that is my plan on Bitcoin, but I did take a bit of a step back this morning, and I just thought to myself, like, it's crazy that we're looking at dip scenarios into 118 and 115, considering that I remember that I used to do live streams pretty much every single day on Crypto Banter, during like the biggest collapses of the market. The FTX collapse comes to mind. I was in a hotel room in London, and I remember doing a market update video talking about how I was buying the fear, and that was at 16K. Can you believe that? I was making a video at 16K about buying Bitcoin and ETH, and now we're at 122K. You can see the video here. What was the exact date of this? November 12th, 2022. I remember we went out actually later that night to a club in London. This is why I'm dressed up in a suit, and you can see me showing that I bought more ETH. I said this was literally during the bottom. Just bought some more ETH. We'll probably go lower because at the time I was like, wow, this is just free falling and I'm catching a knife. But my rule is to buy when there's blood on the streets, and I'm sticking to it. So I made some big buys that day on Ethereum. I remember some alts, Bitcoin. But anyway, I bring that up because I was just thinking this morning, like, it's absolutely crazy. We're talking about a dip, or, you know, if we did go to 114, a crash into 114, when we've seen crashes into 16K, and we've been here every day in this space, which is crazy. And then, if you guys saw my story video that I uploaded, I go more into like when I bought my first Bitcoin. I recommend you watch this because this is going through my whole story. So if you don't know how I got into the space, how I grew my brand, how I got into trading crypto, and then how I ended up running up a big portfolio. I think you'll enjoy this video and find some value there. And, fun fact, it was actually, he did end up replying to my tweet, Safedine Amos. You can see here, he replied, put it right there, brother. That actually put me on to Bitcoin with the Bitcoin Standard roughly in 2019. Fun fact, I was actually mining some Bitcoin in 2013, but we had no idea what we were doing. And that wasn't for 5 to 6 years later that I actually bought my first whole Bitcoin, which I, tell the story in that video. So I'll leave it in the description if you want to watch it after this video. I think it's a good one and gives you some more context behind my story. But, I can't believe that in 2019, we were buying Bitcoin for 5K as a gamble. And now there's literally institutions aping in, sovereign nations aping in, retail aping in. Like, it's absolutely crazy to see that the proof of concept that we, found out about years ago and was very, very speculative has now come to life. I can't believe how it feels for the people that were way earlier than me, that bought it $1, $10, $100. They must, find it even more surreal that we've gotten to this place. And as the DeFi investor points out, he says, good morning to everyone who never stopped believing in this industry, even though it was very, very difficult, for many years of downtrend. 2022, 2023 was quite brutal, just seeing prices go down and down and down. The search traffic for crypto has almost doubled in the past 9 days alone. He says how exit liquidity is coming back, basically just referring to the fact that retail is starting to get interested in crypto again. I actually don't think interest for alts is very high, and that's one of the points I'm going to make as I segue into my altcoin thesis here. We are obviously seeing more interest in Bitcoin, but it's nowhere near the level of retail interest that we have seen in prior cycles when Bitcoin has broken highs. And there's a reason behind that, in my opinion, and it's the fact, I'm going to show you the chart in a second here, that altcoins have underperformed. But at the same time, I also think it's because the drivers behind Bitcoin are different this time. Obviously the fact that we are seeing such a strong bid through the ETFs, it's kind of changed the market, and it's less retail hype driven and more driven by fundamentals, which in many ways is a very, very good thing for Bitcoin. It's just changed the dynamics of the altcoin market a little bit. The last thing I'll say about Bitcoin is this is pretty crazy. I saw this chart on my feed today, and it's basically comparing the gold price in 1978 to the Bitcoin fractal this year in 2025. So firstly, I'll show you the gold price on the right. You can see how, it makes a high, it makes a double top, so a higher high in 1975, then it collapses, runs back up, creates a high, a retest of the prior all-time high, and then it explodes to the upside. That is the exact same chart that we see on Bitcoin. So we see the high, we see a double top, higher high, then we see a bear market, then it comes back to test that level, retests, and then you can see the blue circle and the gray circle, which highlight the next part of the fractal. Now, what happened for gold after going on this pattern is it absolutely ended up going parabolic to the upside, because this is classic bullish price action. And interestingly, from 1974 to 1980, that's 6 years. And from 2021 to 2027, when this would likely end up eventuating, that's also 6 years. So it's the exact same time frame as well. So when I saw this chart, I was pretty, shocked, because it's pretty much the exact same fractal. Now, I don't know if we're going to go as high relative in terms of percentages, but I still do think that there is a lot more upside long term for Bitcoin. It's still a fraction of gold's market cap. I think it's going to end up reaching much closer to parity. So I still think Bitcoin is a $500K to $1 million asset one day. And I say that because you should still have the aim in your head, even with Bitcoin running, of trying to accumulate more Bitcoin. Even if that means being patient, waiting for, capitulation, taking advantage of downtrends. Your goal is to, use altcoins to accumulate more Bitcoin. Now, luckily, we're going into a period where altcoins could actually outperform Bitcoin for a little bit, and you can make a lot of money in that space. And, I plan on putting a lot of those profits back into Bitcoin once Bitcoin ends up putting in its top, at least its local top, and having a little bit of a correction. That's when you can really load up on Bitcoin in terms of spot. For now, I'm just playing the dip continuation game on Bitcoin, being a little bit tighter with my invalidations. Now moving on to altcoins. You can see that the overall crypto total market caps, this does include Bitcoin as well, is now starting to break out and make a higher high, approaching the $4 trillion mark. The total crypto market cap, excluding Bitcoin and excluding Ethereum, does look worse. It's still technically a lower high. But I did think this was a monumental chart to note that the crypto industry in its entirety is now, breaching all-time high territory. And this is good for alts overall in terms of sentiment, even though they are still lagging Bitcoin. As Will Clemente points out, in the grand scheme of things, froth in the altcoin market can actually get a lot worse from here. Both major tops so far this cycle, March 2024 and December 2024, coincided with altcoin open interest flipping Bitcoin open interest on a percentage basis. We're currently nowhere near that level, and that's because there just isn't that much leverage in the altcoin market right now. In fact, if you do chart alts versus Bitcoin, they're actually still underperforming, and I think this is primarily the reason why there is like a lack of retail interest in crypto despite being Bitcoin so high. So I am starting to see a lot of these tweets coming out of the woodwork like, can you believe Bitcoin's at all-time highs, yet no one is interested in alts? A crazy altcoin season's going to happen, or, retail isn't even back yet and Bitcoin's already at all-time highs. Imagine what happens when they come back. Like, that's obviously a very clicky narrative and a clicky thing to say that will get engagement on social media. But the reason why people aren't back is because they are clinically underexposed to Bitcoin. And even I feel like I'm underexposed to Bitcoin compared to what I should be. I'm lucky enough to hold some Bitcoin, but I do wish I held a lot more. But markets are always a catch-22, right? You either don't hold enough when things are pumping and you want to FOMO and buy more, or when things are dumping, you're overexposed. And you're like, why am I holding so much? And then you start panicking. So it's like, you can never really win. If the bags are pumping, you wish you had more. And if the market's crashing, you wish you had less. So I just have to sit back and be grateful and, stop complaining, even though I do want to accumulate more Bitcoin. But going back to the point I was making, the primary reason why people aren't that, euphoric right now and why retail is still out of the market is because most people are clinically underexposed to Bitcoin, and most people hold a lot of altcoins, which still by and large have not recovered versus Bitcoin. Now, there are some select alts which are doing really, really well. Some that I've been speaking about recently as well, which we'll touch on today. But by and large, altcoins have been underperforming Bitcoin. So I do think that's worth noting. And there's even a possibility, and this doesn't mean alts will crash, right? It could mean Bitcoin just outperforms for the next little period. But there's even a possibility that we actually test this low first before we end up going on a big reversal. This is the others chart. So the top 10, altcoin index excluding the top 10 versus Bitcoin. So this really gives you an idea of the small caps, mid caps versus Bitcoin. So we could actually come down a bit further before we end up running. I do think we might see a bit of relief now, which is what I'm going to touch on this video. Planning some trades for this week. So, we could potentially push up a little bit and then end up going down to this level. Once again, that doesn't mean alts will crash. It just means Bitcoin performs better. So that could actually be during a scenario where alts go up, but Bitcoin actually goes from 120 to 140 or something like that. So just keep that in mind. It's not necessarily bearish alts, but it is, bullish Bitcoin relative to alts. Remember, this isn't going to be a classic alt season. I am starting to see people coming on the timeline as well, screaming about alt season. I want to remind you once again that everything won't go up all at once. I know that wasn't the case in November, but it'll be even less so the case this time around. However, I do think Bitcoin has set the stage through improving market sentiment for good stuff to run. This is a very powerful thing I'm about to say. I want you to understand this concept. So, yes, there isn't a wealth effect like there was in previous cycles of, people trading Bitcoin on chain to Ethereum and then alts. Yes, there's lots of altcoin dispersion this cycle and altcoin dilution. There's also narrative dilution. There's attention dilution. Yes, there was lots of scams which drove a lot of retail out of the market. Yes, retail is sidelined and they feel a lot of FOMO that they're not in Bitcoin. However, what Bitcoin breaking all-time highs does do that is positive for the altcoin market is it creates a sentiment baseline. What do I mean by that? When Bitcoin's chopping or going down, because altcoins are weaker relative to Bitcoin, alts don't have a floor. So many bleed and it isn't the right environment for good alts to actually pump. When Bitcoin breaks all-time highs or when Bitcoin is in an uptrend, okay, maybe alts aren't actually outperforming and we asserted that they aren't outperforming before, but what the strong Bitcoin price action does do is it does just put a blockade on sentiment not to get worse. And the thing is, you don't even need great sentiment to make money in alts. You just need sentiment remaining constant or getting slightly better. Because the top runners in the market, and even if you look at, some of the recent runners like Useless, like Bonk, even today, like I saw some altcoins like Ski Mask pop 50% in a day. These coins are now able to run because the sentiment has stabilized. So it just creates an environment. The Bitcoin pump creates an environment for runners to run if they have the right narrative. The problem with trading, like a month ago or even a couple of weeks ago, is that you could have the best thesis ever. You'd long a coin. It could be a great fundamental coin. It could have great technicals, but it wouldn't get continuation because people just didn't have the confidence buying. Now, the strong narratives, when the stars align on a narrative and technicals, now when you bid a coin like that, I'm noticing they are actually running because there's follow through on moves, and the follow through only comes because sentiment has improved slightly. So that is very good for traders, especially if you're narrative trading on chain. That's something I do a lot of, even if you're leverage trading, because it makes trading a lot easier. I wouldn't say it's easy mode yet. That may come once Bitcoin goes even higher. But it is easier mode than what it was because at least sentiment is a bit better to actually enable facilitation on a lot of trades across the market. And that's been something I've really been taking advantage of over the past couple of weeks. You can see in the Discord, I've been extremely active over the past couple of days, giving regular updates in there with my Bitcoin plan, my altcoin plans, all my setups. And you can see that Paradise as well, our head low time frame trader, has been taking advantage of these long continuation plays, which are very effective in this environment. So his last trade, he made 200% on Ava AI. You can also see he had a good trade on CETUS, had a good trade, I believe it was on Sonic as well, Virtual, Syrup. All these trades are only possible because the market is now allowing the runners to run. Like, it's an environment that is allowing trades to actually happen. So even though everything isn't going up all at once, if you're in the strong coins or if you're a technical trader, it's actually been very, very good. And you can see that a lot of members in the group are starting to jump on this train as well. Daniel with a bunch of profitable trades, Elad as well, hit the PENGU trade, hit the useless trade. I've been sharing lots of useless charts in the group as well. So much better environment now to actually take advantage of the market. And that's what we've been doing every single day in the Mars High Club. And you can see Fabian also highlights that he has key areas of interest in the altcoin market where he's looking for opportunities amidst altcoins, because as I said, it's going to be more sector and narrative specific. So I'm going to leak some stuff from Mars High Club, but it's okay because we love you guys here on the YouTube channel as well, even if you're not in there. He says recently strongest alts he's looking at, so Hype, PENGU, SPX, Fartcoin, Virtual, Kita, Bitcoin, treasury companies, newer launch VC tokens, reflexive business models, so Ray, Aero, ENA. These can do very well, by the way, in like good funding environments and good markets where there's more trading. I do like this as well. That's a bit of alpha for you. ETH ecosystem betas, so PEPE, MOG, etc. If ETH continues to outperform, which it has been versus alts, not entirely versus Bitcoin. ICM, potential for round 2, and some other small cap on-chain tokens. Fabian, if you don't know who he is, he's our head kind of gem hunter in the group. He's an exceptional, not only macro analyst, but also small cap analyst. And he just posted, I'm not going to scroll down and reveal them because some are quite low in market cap, but he just posted another 3 altcoin plays in the past 48 hours that he's taken. One I think is really, really good, one of the latest ones, but it is high risk. So just keep that in mind. Of course, if you want access to all of these calls, all of our trades, my analysis, etc., you can click the link in the description and join the Mars High Club. If you aren't already a member, I think now is a great time to join because there's just so much ROI with the amount of trading we're doing. I mean, you can see my channel alone in the past 48 hours. I'm constantly providing updates, setups. If you go to my questions channel, I'm constantly answering questions. I see some people while I'm actually recording asking me new questions, which I'll answer after. So just lots happening in the group right now. So if you've been on the fence or if you haven't wanted to join due to bad market conditions, well, now's the time because market conditions are getting a lot better. But now let's get into some of the top altcoin plays that I am watching. We'll go through the charts now and I'll go through my thesis for some of them. So keeping in mind that right now, not everything has the juice to go up all at once in absence of a broader altcoin narrative, but sentiment is good enough to facilitate some of the top trends actually running. And you have to remember, I made this interesting point on X, like a lot of people are feeling Bitcoin FOMO. A lot of people do feel sidelined that they don't own enough Bitcoin. So I think a lot of people are chasing alts to make up for the fact that they don't own enough Bitcoin. Now, in isolation, this is very dangerous, right? And I think this ends in tears for alts and for Bitcoin. But until then, I think there is a front-running opportunity because you know retail's going to come in and try and compensate by gambling more to make up for missing the Bitcoin run. I think any gambles that you make now, any trades that you take now are probably positive EV, knowing that that liquidity could be coming in the future. Obviously, there's no guarantee that it'll come. Bitcoin could drop for some unforeseen reason, but it's all about EV and playing risk reward in the market. So I do think the counter argument to not doing crazy things to compensate for Bitcoin is the fact that others will do crazy things to compensate for missing Bitcoin, aka, trading altcoins. So this once again adds to the point that I was talking about before of just creating that environment and creating that sentiment for, runners to actually run. So now let's get into some coins I'm watching. I wanted to start with the PumpFun launch, which is, I think, happening around the time I'm releasing this video. It's around an hour from recording. I'm going to put it out straight after I've recorded though, so might not be live depending on when you're watching this, but this is going live on spot very soon. It's already live on perps. It's actually dipping right now to the 5-6 level. Obviously, the ICO, which a lot of people didn't get access to. Even one of my orders got cancelled on Bybit, which I'm absolutely filthy about. The experience on the centralized exchanges was very bad, and they actually didn't get the allocation we thought they would, and they refunded a bunch of people. Extremely annoying, but that was at $4 billion, and we are seeing the price come down closer to that $4 billion mark across perps. So I personally do think PumpFun is going to be a good opportunity if the price can get close to that 4 bill zone. I honestly think this could be a $10 billion plus FDV token because of the dynamics at play here. There's a lot of people that are sidelined that, couldn't get access to the ICO. The centralized exchange glitches, the fact that they couldn't get access only makes it worse. I think a lot of whales also couldn't size up correctly into this token. And I think there's a lot of pent up demand. And I also think Pump is one of the only tokens in crypto which is actually revenue generating. Yes, its revenue is down, but in terms of a protocol that actually makes money, there aren't many projects, only like Hyperliquid, some of the Ethereum plays, some of the DeFi plays, Bonk, that actually make money, that are altcoins. So in terms of a proxy to, this reflexive thing that Fabian was talking about in the group of getting into tokens that are reflexive in terms of their earnings based on market sentiment, Pump, I think, hits the fundamentals well. And the dynamic with a lot of shorters and a lot of people fading it, that could lead to a hated rally. Like in the early days, remember when Hyperliquid absolutely ran from like $8 when I first covered it and when I first started buying, it ran to like, it actually started lower. I bought in after a lot of the hate. It was like at $5. I bought it at $8. It went to $16, $20. People hated it on X, hated it on the timeline because it just kept running. So I think it could be similar with Pump. Like if people miss the ICO and then it runs, people will just be forced to FOMO in, driving price higher and squeezing shorts. But my playbook here is buying dips. So I will just buy dips on this coin. And this is perps. I'm not buying perps, but when it's on spot, because I don't want to take on leverage risk, if we get any dips like this, I would be buying. If it bounces and then dips again, I would be buying. Then obviously if it forms an uptrend, then it's easier to buy because you have invalidation on your buys. In the beginning, just my first couple entries, I won't be as strict with my invalidation because I want to get that core, at least 50% of the position stable. as low as possible, but then I'll lower my cost basis and increase the RR on my trade by getting in once we actually have a trend, and I might have some invalidations on the short-term buys in that trend. So I'll keep you updated on that, but PumpFun, definitely keep your eye on it. Another thing I'm keeping my eye on if Pump does well is Bonk, because I think Bonk is around a 2.2 to 2.3 bill FDV. Pump's at 5.8 right now, but if it does go to like 10 bill at some point or 8-9 bill, Bonk should theoretically reprice closer to Pump, considering it's actually outperforming Pump right now in terms of volume. So that's quite interesting, right? If one application is doing more in fees, but it's, a quarter or half of the valuation, then theoretically it should come to parity, if not above. And I think the higher Pump goes, the higher it drags Bonk as well. So if you want a beta with maybe less volatility, because I think Pump will be extremely volatile in its early days, I actually really like the Bonk trade. This is one that I'm already in. I shared this on the show. I shared this in the Discord at the 2 level. I know there's a lot of decimals, so I'm just going to say 2. It ran up 36%. It's retraced a little bit, 28%. If you are looking for an entry, because it's broken out, this is a new uptrend. So it was in a downtrend, it's broken trend, it's now in an uptrend. The playbook in an uptrend is to long retraces, just like on Bitcoin, right? You want to be longing retraces. So looking at the Bonk chart, I do see the 4-hour money noodle as a very nice level, and this indicator is available if you're in the Mars High Club to actually bid. So if it comes down here, I'd be bidding the noodle, and if it breaks below the noodle, say if it does something like this, and we get a bearish impulse to the upside, then I'd look at invalidating and then maybe buying lower on a range low base formation. So that would be my plan with actually trading Bonk. But basically buying into the money noodle on dips is my plan with Bonk. Another beta that I like is Useless. This is forming a range, so this isn't trending anymore. It was trending, and this strategy of bidding the 4-hour money noodle worked extremely well all the way up. And that's something that I actually did on the show 3 weeks ago during the whole, geopolitical stuff that was going down in the Middle East and everyone was freaking out. I actually bidded, as you can see here, at 87 million, if you can see here on the right, during this phase of the market when it was down in this zone here. And that was on a retest of the money noodle, and then it kept respecting trend to the upside and exploding. So we got a very, very good entry. Well done to everyone that watched that video and bought while everyone was fearful. I highlighted this rally-based rally pattern that Bitcoin's also adhering to at the moment. It's a very powerful upwards trending pattern that happens. So uptrend rally, rally base happened on Useless as well. We saw the rally here, the base form, the rally, and now another bigger base is forming. So the way to actually play these bases as they form is to actually just play the range. So it's gone from a trending market to a ranging market, and in a ranging market, you want to look at the extremities. So you have range high extremity, you could play a breakout. So if it breaks out above and it comes back and tags this zone, that would be a buy. So that would be the first scenario. My next scenario for buying would be bidding range low and potentially cutting below. So if it is ranging, it's just chopping in between, right? So if it comes back down to the lows here, you can look at playing the bid zone there at 22. So that would be 220 million in terms of market cap. It's at 280 million right now. And until there is resolution to either side, you can just not do anything. When a token is ranging, that's generally the playbook you want to take until it forms a new trend. A new trend comes when it breaks to the upside and then starts trending again, and then you have a rally, another base, another rally. And this is the exact same price action that we saw on Bitcoin. So it broke out of this trend here. It rallied, it formed a base. It rallied, it formed a base, these mini bases, and then we had a longer one that happened. You had opportunities to actually buy in on the lows here, on the tags of this base, and then when you had a breakout, you had breakout confirmation, and then it went on the next leg to the upside. And it might actually be forming another base here, but it's too early to tell. Like if it chops a little bit here and it starts to form something, we would have a bit more data. The last base actually lasted for 3 days. So if this lasted for 3 days, it would take us to here. So it can actually do something like this and just chop sideways. And then we can kind of make trading decisions based on that. Or it can come down and retest. We're going to see very, very soon. That price action still needs to play out. But the point I'm making is that this price action is very, very common in trending markets like we're seeing. So until Useless has a breakout to the upside, I would just play the ranges on that one. But, I'm still chilling from this 80 mil entry, and I am just looking to actually add more. This is a bag midterm that I think can perform very well as a Bonk beta, if PumpFun does better, I actually think it's better for Bonk, not the opposite. They are competitors, but I think they're also symbiotic in terms of the general narrative because of the relative valuations. Fartcoin, I also wanted to highlight. This could be breaking out. I don't really like breakout trades. I did take one on Bonk, but like I'm not a big fan of like, oh, it's broken out, I'm going to buy. What I prefer is, okay, it's broken out. This shows me that the trend is reversed. Cool. So I'll look at a breakout on the daily, but then what I'll do is I'll go to the 30-minute chart or the hourly chart and I'll see what price is doing after the breakout. So if it breaks out and then it starts to form that pattern that I was discussing before, then I actually have some entries on the lower time frames in confluence with the fact it's broken out on the higher time frame. So just keep that in mind, and that's the strategy that I've been implementing on Bitcoin as well. We saw Binance today actually announce that they're going to launch their official like PumpFun competitor, so to speak, so a bonding mechanism for the token launch. We actually saw PumpFun sell off and Bonk sell off a little bit since this was announced. I don't think this is inherently bullish for Pump, but it was a headline which caused price to go down. Bearish for Pump. Look, obviously more competition is not good in terms of market share, but I don't really think people are gonna, migrate to BSC in a rush. Solana has definitely solidified itself as the retail chain. So I don't think it's too much of a threat for now, but keep your eye on it. And one thing you should definitely be keeping your eye on is BNB, because BNB is a beneficiary of this, at least from a narrative perspective, but also because all the Binance launch pools and presumably this, PumpFun competitor are going to require you to stake or hold or use BNB in some way. And once again, what do you want to do? You want to look at a breakout on the higher time frame, so it's broken out on the higher time frame, and then you want to work your way down to the lower time frames to try and get an entry. And BNB is technically in an uptrend, but it's just a little bit choppy right now. So I don't see any clear trends, at least on 1 hour. It's not really respecting the noodle. A bigger pullback on 4 hour, which is a pretty good time frame for the noodle, might be something that I bid, but that would probably represent a 2% move to the downside. And given BNB's strength, that would also probably represent or happen only if Bitcoin came down to this 118 CME gap, which is also a bid zone for me on Bitcoin. So there's confluence there for a potential Bitcoin dip and a BNB long scenario. You will notice a lot of my trades right now are shorter term because that's genuinely what I'm doing right now. I am focusing on these opportunities because that is what the market is giving me at the moment. As I said, the environment is good, that it's respecting trends and respecting my system and Paradise system, which mine is kind of framed upon. So, when you have an edge in the market, that's what you have to play. But in the meantime, I continue to aggressively look at, smaller cap on-chain, mid to long-term investment opportunities, which I'm sure we're going to discuss later this week. So make sure you are subscribed to the channel. But I wanted to give you guys a high alpha video to start the week with a lot of trade setups just to get the wheels turning in terms of, the coins you should be looking at. This is my watch list here on the right. I'll move my face for a second so you can screenshot and save it. These are like the tokens that I think are looking the strongest right now. And these are the ones you should be tracking throughout the week, but I'm going to give you all the setups now. Hyperliquid, I don't think we're going to be lucky enough to get this, but I think the only buy for me right now would be back at $40 at this zone here. This was the flag breakout zone, also confluence with the noodle on the daily. But yeah, I don't know if we're going to get there. I don't need to buy at 48. If I don't get the entry I want, I won't get the entry. There are plenty of other coins in the market where I won't get an entry. And I think that's good advice in general. Like everyone, is always trying to FOMO over one coin or another. It might be Bitcoin for you. Like you might really want a Bitcoin entry, and I totally get it, but don't force the entry if it's not there. Be patient, wait. If it doesn't come, there's so many other amazing charts in the market. There's so many other amazing opportunities in the market. We're discussing many of other setups in today's video, which you can take that look better from a technical perspective than maybe Hyperliquid or Bitcoin. So you will get your entries eventually. Even Hyperliquid has big dips. Bitcoin always has big dips at some point. You just don't need to force your entry. I think that's very, very important. But Hyperliquid has been an absolute beast. I continue, this is just from a trading point of view, but I still hold a lot of my spot. I did a full deep dive on May 26th here on Hyperliquid. Since then, it's gone from 35 even higher to almost $50. And obviously, I've been holding my first spot position from $8, but taking profits on the way because I think this could end up being a 10x. So I like to ladder out on the way up instead of nailing a clean 10x because you never know what's going to happen in the market, of course. Moving through the watch list here, we have 4 more. CPOOL actually looks quite good. This has started to thrust to the upside. This is a chart that I shared in my Discord on the 17th of June. So this is just under a month ago. And you can see here that I highlighted this as a bid zone at 10 cents. And since then, it's rallied roughly 70% into the highs, and it's now starting to retrace a little bit. The reason I share this is because I think there is a bit of a setup here to keep in mind. So it has been respecting the 1 hour money noodle on the way up. It is starting to lose it right now. But if you're watching this relatively soon to the video being uploaded, just go to the chart, go into the 1 hour money noodle. If not, 100 MA should also work. But obviously, if you're in the Discord, this has been tailored specifically to our strategy. And just look whether it's still following trend. You can also draw in a trend line like this and see whether it's actually holding trend or not. Because what you often see with these noodle breakdowns is you see like deviation reclaims, and then these can be entries. For example, this was deviation at one point. This was also looking like deviation at one point. Technically it didn't break, but you see these like lower bound retests. They do happen when you move into the space below. So yes, this could come down and reset and form a new base, but keep your eye on a short-term scalp here on the 1 hour, because that would be the trade that takes you to the high time frame resistance zone at 18 cents. But that is completely different to the trade that I shared, that I took the other day. Looking through the last three now, Doge is also starting to break out. I'm seeing a lot of people just post this chart with no horizontals and be like, Doge is breaking out. But like, keep in mind, horizontals are always more important than diagonals in the market. I don't know why people are obsessed with these diagonal breakouts. What you actually want is to beat resistance zones, so to flip resistance into support and fill demand zones, so hunt liquidity. These diagonals, they don't really mean anything. They just look cool. What they do, however, is they suggest trend shifts. So you'll notice a lot of my strategy is I'll go into a higher time frame, I'll look for a break, but if it hasn't made a higher high yet, what I will do is I'll go onto the lower time frames and I'll look for an entry. So I just wanted to highlight this to say it should be on your watch list. Doge looks really good, and it's definitely a retail coin. So when Bitcoin runs, this is like, a coin that a lot of people are infatuated with from, back in 2021, and it'll probably catch a bid, but I would definitely go down to the lower time frames to look to actually enter a position, and it's still nodding up against strong resistance here. So there's no actionable trade right now. One that could be actionable soon is PINLINK. This, you guys probably remember it. This was a coin that did extremely well for me towards the, I think, end of last year. It ran up. I first called it at 40 cents. It ran up to $4, so it was a 10x. It did go through a really nasty period of consolidation, like literally trading like a stable coin. But I wanted to highlight today that it has actually flipped this support zone. It briefly was resistance again, but it's reflipped. So this is a reclaim play. Like CPOOL, if we do get a dip, I think this could be, like CPOOL's getting right now, it could be an opportunity to potentially scoop up some more PINLINK in this zone. And obviously you've got your spot invalidation below, which, maybe not great for leverage traders, but it's like a 28% inval. Like, I personally don't think it would break below unless Bitcoin absolutely, crashed. So I think you could be relatively well protected in that scenario. But, obviously it's crypto. Anything can happen. But this would be the level to look at bidding. This is a potential scenario. We get the sweeps liquidity, also the money noodle on the daily, which it was, tagging up bearishly. You can see it kept hitting the noodle and rejecting, finally flipped. So once you get a flip, now we're just looking for a retest. And then that would be your entry trigger, even if this comes up a little bit. For a potential run, and then it can go back to this level here, which is $1.40 in the right market. Coins like this, especially the on-chain coins in the Ethereum eco, this is like an AI RWA play. They can run if they have the right narrative. So wanted to highlight that as a potential trade setup for you. Quick update on MNT, because I shared this on the last show at 64 cents. This has done really, really well. So well done to everyone that has got into that. At range low, it's now started to move into range high. I think we're approaching a TP zone here between 74 and 78 to lock in some gains from that trade. I am holding a bag longer term. I think as an ecosystem, the Bybit Mantle ecosystem is extremely strong. They're moving a lot into TradFi. They're doing a lot of stuff with reward assets. So I think that is a positive catalyst longer term. I'm looking at holding my longer term spot position, but on my shorter term position, looking at taking some profits into this zone if you did join that trade, because that's been a very good one. So I just wanted to give you a quick update on that. And I don't want to make this video too long because I'm going to be uploading probably many videos this week. So that is my watch list for the week. That's what I'm watching. Those are my thoughts on the market. That is my plan for Bitcoin. I will see you in the Mars High Club. In the meantime, I'm going to go answer a bunch of questions now. If you do want to join and get access to all the amazing alpha from Paradise, me, Fabian, Doc, Morin, and ask me questions personally, because I have a questions channel there, come join. Now's an amazing time to do so, given the market is in a good environment now to actually facilitate a lot of the trade setups that we are taking in the group. I'm going to see you in the next one. Hopefully you have a lovely rest of your day. Good luck in the markets today. I'll see you tomorrow. Peace out.